So let's begin with our first speaker, who is Dr. Salman Abu Sitta. Dr. Sitta is a Palestinian historian and founder of the Palestinian Land Society. Dr. Sitta is also known for his groundbreaking project, Mapping Historic Palestine and developing a practical plan for implementing the right of return of Palestinian refugees. Today, Dr. Sitta will be speaking to us on 10 colonial wars against Palestinians. Dr. Sitta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Amina. Thank you all for being present tonight. The settler colonialism projects are all evil and criminal, but each one of them has a different hue and a different history. Not to justify it, just to describe the elements of this evil. The evil in Palestine started in the minds of Europe 125 years ago, but it has an active history germinated by the actions of Britain, evil actions of Britain since 1917 till today, 100 years ago. Now, we know that the people of the land have been attacked by settlers, but I would like to explain to you here that Zionism, which came from Europe, supported by Western colonial powers, Zionism has waged 10 kinds of wars against Palestinians. Not 10 wars, there are many, many wars than 10. Small battles, big battles, and so on. I'm talking about 10 kinds of wars. The first kind is military. It's really to conquer and seize the land in spite of the prevailing Zionist propaganda. They were minority. 120,000 settlers, soldiers from First World War invaded Palestine in 1948. They were organized in 9 brigades, and they had carried out 31 military operations. As a result, they conquered 78% of Palestine, and 67 they conquered the rest. It is exactly like Nazi Germany occupying France. It is a conquest plan. The second war against Palestinians was silencing the voice of the victims. In 1948, about 6 massacres took place, but none was reported in the 5 Western news media, except perhaps Deir Yassin. Zionism built a huge edifice, a false narrative based on misinformation, deception, and sheer lies. In this narrative, a Nakba is denied, and the refugee expulsion and dozens of massacres did not take place. It's in fact ironic that the perpetrators of wars of aggression and its victims, on the other hand, have exchanged places in the Zionist narrative. The victim was billed as the aggressor, but of course, all these falsehoods have been exposed recently by some historians. The third war against Palestinians is political. Next to the military war, this is the most effective. The US and many Western countries voted veto against UN action against Israel and thwart any legal action against the state. Those countries themselves have a sordid colonial history in Asia and Africa. By the mid-20th century, the colonial forces packed their bags and returned to Europe, to their home countries. But at the very same time, organized European Zionist colonies descended upon Palestine in the opposite direction to colonize it with the blessing of the Western powers. The fourth war waged against Palestinians is geographical. New Israeli maps deleted 55,000 names describing the Palestinian landscape, and they replaced them with 6,800 created Hebrew names honoring their leaders. The use of Palestinian names, even by Palestinians, is discouraged or prohibited. The fifth war against Palestinians is historical. The historical record of Palestine in the last 2,000 years, at least, is obliterated. It made into null, blank pages in Israeli textbooks. It was replaced by the history of Jews since the First World War only, and the period before Jesus Christ, which is speculative. The cultural history of Palestinians in food and dress is expropriated today and claimed by those European imposters. The sixth war against Palestinians is archaeological. Many people do not know that this was a systematic effort since 1948. We know that in 1948, the Israelis systematically destroyed 500 villages. But very few people know that the bulldozers and the soldiers who were destroying these houses are accompanied by Israeli archaeological team. And the archaeological team looks at the old remnants of houses and places and decide if they will destroy them and keep them if they find one stone or one edifice is of benefit to the history of Jews. This archaeological destruction is carried out in 1948 through the destruction of Palestinian homes, and it is continued till today by claiming false claims about some artifacts. The seventh war against Palestinians is religious racist. The Zionists recruited God to win this war. It claimed that all Jews are one race, and they originated in Palestine, and after 2,000 years absence somewhere, they decided to return so-called home to the God-given land and recover their property. Hence, the right to expel the Palestinians, the natives of the place. Today, unfortunately, the evangelists and the former restorationists are recruited politically with great effect in the United States to support Zionism. The eighth war against Palestinians is defamation. Palestinian fighters defending their homes and their country and their supporters are called terrorists. Not the one who destroyed the homes, not the one who killed the innocent people of the land. It is the people who defend themselves are called terrorists. Even a distinguished man like Edward Said was called Professor of Terror. Anyone today who explains the facts about Palestine, even among respected scholars in the United Nations, is called an anti-Semite, given a certificate of evil. Palestinians are open for vilification, but it's only Jews that are immune from vilification or even criticism. The B'nai B'rith Anti-Defamation League mission of fighting defamation of Jews is turned into an instrument of defaming Palestinians. The ninth war against Palestinians is legal. Domestic laws in Western countries, particularly the United States and Germany now, criminalize support for the grassroots campaign of boycott, divestment, and investment, BDS, and hence criticize Israeli war crimes. Criticizing Israeli war crimes and apartheid is to be a criminal act. The US government cuts funds now from universities that teach the Palestinian question, even in academic circles, even quoting the United Nations resolutions on that. But efforts to eradicate, to explain Israeli war crimes before the International Criminal Court are resisted by several Western countries who appeal to ICC, not to entertain discussion of the crimes of Israel. So in effect, they are waging a war not only against Palestinians, but against the UN and the international law. The 10th war is economic. Since the Jewish National Fund was created in 1901, Jewish money and the fortunes of Rothschild family were used to colonize Palestine. Under the aegis of the British Mandate, colonization of the country mushroomed. But the seizure of Palestinian land in 1948, which is 20,500 square kilometers. Let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, there is not one single kilometer in what's called Israel today is obtained by any legal means at all, neither through the mandate nor through the United Nations. Every single kilometer controlled today by Israel is obtained by brute force against any legal justification. Reparations paid by Germany to Israel in the 1950s were vital for the colonization of Palestine under the Jews. Jewish financial power in the United States today, supporting AIPAC activity, is a potent colonial force against Palestinians. The Israeli imposed blockade of Gaza, a criminal act, not only a criminal act, as my friend Dr. Dawood said, it's genocide. Genocide by any other name, whether it's called incremental or not, it is genocide. The Israeli imposed blockade of Gaza is genocide, but Israel stifles the economic freedom also of the West Bank and converts the people into economic hostages. Most of this is allowed either under rules of occupation or sovereignty, which applies also to Palestinians in 1948. These 10 wars against Palestinians are unprecedented in the history of colonialism. Usually the colonial power want to seize the land and keep people maybe as cheap labor or not. They neglect them, but they don't destroy them, and they neglect them at least. All the wars in other colonial projects have ceased in a sort modus vivendi, except in Palestine. It's still as active as it was in 1917 or in 1948, which is 25,000 days and nights. But all this should not discourage us. The Palestinians are still alive and well, and it is impossible to succeed in uprooting a nation older than many European nations, older than many colonial nations, have history most rooted than anywhere in Europe or the United States. This force cannot succeed in the long term. But the question remaining now is that the Palestinians, who are 13 million people, half of them are on the soil of Palestine, are now fighting alone because some people who are labeled as Arab leaders have abandoned Palestine, but their people did not abandon them. Neither the people of goodwill are all around the world. And they will triumph no matter what. If they have succeeded so far for 72 years to stay alive and fighting back, if they succeeded in 100 years since Balfour came to the scene, if they succeeded in 125 years since the germ of colonialism started in Europe against Palestine, they will succeed now, and I'm sure they will, God willing. Thank you very much.